Hi, my name is Bob Brown and welcome to my 8 and 35mm channel. In this video, we're going to process a color image from a scanned color negative. In the previous video, we did the same thing in black and white. There's some common things that you do with both images, but color has its own challenges separate from black and white. Hopefully, we're going to address those problems. Here's the process we're going to use to do these images. Here's the color image we're going to work with. If it looks familiar, it's because I used it in a previous video. I'll do the bulk of my editing in Adobe Photoshop. Those green arrows point to scratches we can fix with Adobe's clone tool. See that blue arrow that just popped up? That arrow points to a really weird long wide line that I'm not quite sure how I'm going to tackle yet. We'll try the plugin, and if that doesn't work, we'll just do it in Photoshop. Either way, we can fix it. Those black arrows point to just some of the speckles. I'll get rid of that with my despeckler program, and the rest I'll get rid of with a spot healing brush tool. Another thing we're going to do is make some color corrections. There's also a greenish and magenta color cast. We'll do our best to correct that. We can fix that color cast through the Camera Raw editor. To get to that Camera Raw editor, select Filter at the taskbar, then just select Camera Raw Filter, and that will bring us to the Camera Raw interface. While in Camera Raw, I'll probably use one of these two areas to do the color corrections. You'll see when we get there. Oh yeah, we're also going to trim out the garbage areas around the edges of this image, as shown by the red arrows. The main tools I'll use inside of Photoshop is the Move tool, Spot Healing Brush tool, the Clone tool, and the LaserSoft SRDx despeckling plugin. Well, that should give you a general idea of what we're going to do, so the only thing left to do is just do it. As always, I'll make a copy of the original image. That's to keep it protected. I'll now rename the new layer Scratches. And if it's not already obvious, that's because we're going to remove all of the scratches on that layer. Now let's address those scratches. The first thing I'm going to do is zoom in a little bit so I can better see those scratches. And yep, there they are. For stuff like this, my go-to is the clone tool. My goal now is to get that clone tool as close as I can to that scratch without touching it. Oh, and by the way, one of the things you got to avoid when it comes to the clone tool is what's called repeating patterns. And it's exactly that. You're repeating a pattern. You're making an exact copy of whatever you select. In our case, it's a scratch. So when you, let's say, I'll just use my fingers. Here's the scratch. And I want to copy this area over that scratch. It'll make an exact copy of that area over here, and which will hopefully disguise or make that go away and you will never notice it. But if there's another mark over here, it'll duplicate that mark to where the scratch was. That's the repeating pattern, and your eye will pick it up. If you accidentally do that, you can either undo it and pick a different spot, or you can clone right over that mark, and that would pretty much solve the problem. To start cloning, I'll hit the Alt key, left click, and that will be the point everything gets copied from. Now I'll place my cursor on the scratch directly to the right of our selected point, and then I'll left click and start moving that circle along the scratch, and it will duplicate all of the pixels to the left. If you end up with an obvious repeating pattern, then just simply go to another point, select it, and go over that repeated pattern, and that should take care of it. I'll do the first scratch in real time, and then after that I'll speed up the video to finish this scratches layer quicker. Now I want to protect our scratches layer. I'll do that by dragging it down to the plus sign where it'll make a copy of it. I'll then rename our copy to Speckles because that's what we're going to clean up next. Next, I'll open up the despeckler program. I'll do that by going to Filter, LaserSoft Imaging, SRDx. And by the way, if you don't have any despeckling programs, then you're just going to have to do this manually. I've done it that way as well. It just takes a heck of a lot longer. Let's do a quick refresher on the interface for the despeckler. I'll use the same images I used in the previous video processing black and white images. I was just too lazy to redo it with a color image. All the functions are exactly the same. We'll go back to our color image right after this refresher. The plugin will open with your original image. There's also a Mark Defects tab, which is where you edit the thing to get rid of the speckles, and then there's the Optimize tab, which shows the results. You can go back and forth between these tabs. If all you have are white or bright speckles, then you'll check that box which says Bright Defect. Then the app looks for those type of speckles. The detection intensity has a slider and a box with a number in it. You can then adjust the intensity of how you want to attack those speckles. The tile size changes the size of a tile which surrounds a speckle. The advanced settings allows you to add or subtract from your selections. You can also change their size and intensity. Once you think you're finished here, then go ahead and select the OK button, and that will bring you back to Photoshop. To start, select the Mark Defects tab. Then we're going to go over to the right where it says Settings. Currently, we have the light and dark defects boxes checked. I'm going to keep those two boxes active. The only thing I'm going to mess with here is the intensity slider. That slider will determine how aggressively you want to attack those speckles. Let's play around with that slider and determine which will be the best setting for our situation. I can tell you right now, this image isn't nearly as bad as that black and white image we worked with in the previous video. Based on my experience with previous images, I kind of already know the range is going to be somewhere from 12 to 15 on the aggressiveness. And since this image is in relatively good shape, if I had to guess again, I assume we're going to end up somewhere between 13 and 14. Let's try and confirm that. The intensity slider shows 12, so let's start with 12. As I increase the intensity, the red marks on the screen will intensify. All right, let's take a look at 13. I'm going to drop down to 10 to see what that looks like. Okay, now let's take a look at 11. Back up to 12. And now 13. 14. Let's look at 15. Yikes! It looks like our picture has the measles. I think the 14 setting looks about right. It's a little aggressive in some areas, and I'm going to remove those areas out of the equation. To do that, I'll just use that eraser brush right there. Then again, if I want to add to the selection, I'll just use the add brush. I think the intensity setting of 14 is going to work best for this image. So let's start subtracting and adding as needed. I think you get the idea. To save time, I'm going to finish the rest of this off camera. Well, I think that looks pretty good. Now let's select the Optimize tab to see our final result. Yep, that came out nice. At this point, we can go ahead and select the OK button at the bottom and return back to Photoshop. That's our progress bar saving our work, and we're back to Photoshop. At this point, I'm going to go over the image one more time to look for spots I might have missed. I'll do the vast majority of this with the Spot Healing Brush tool. Like before, I'm going to go ahead and cut this short and do the work in the background off camera. After all, once you see me do a few sections, the rest is all repetitive. I think that's pretty much it. I think the image looks pretty good. Now I want to protect our work. And how do we do that? We just make a copy of that layer. And unless I have to, I won't touch that layer again. One other thing, always get in the habit of saving your work. Do it constantly by simply selecting Control or Command S. Next, we're going to make some tonal and color adjustments within the Camera Raw section. First, highlight the layer you want to use. I went ahead and highlighted our layer. Now, to get to the Camera Raw filter, you'll just go to the taskbar at the top, select Filter, Camera Raw Filter. Then, your Camera Raw editor will open. Let's do that now. And there you go. We're in the Camera Raw editor. While we're in Camera Raw, I only plan to use two categories. We're currently in one of them, and that's where you can make color and tonal changes, stuff like that. It's that button right there. And this button will allow us to make masks. I'm going to start with the eyedropper tool, which will give me a kind of a down and dirty color correction. It should get us close, but we are going to have to tweak it further. I'm going to sample two areas which look fairly neutral. I'll start with that triangle looking thing inside the windshield. Well, that's not too bad. Let's try the other spot. I think the corner of that notepad should work pretty good. And it does. I'll go with that. You see those red areas at the top? Those represent completely blown out areas. I can fix that simply by reducing the highlights. Next, I want to reduce the exposure. I'll add some contrast, and I'll make some adjustments to the whites and the darks. Next, I'll skip over the color section because we already did that with the eyedropper tool. Now I'm going to go to the effects panel. I'm not going to mess with the texture or clarity because I know they'll make this image gritty. However, the dehaze should help, and it does. I see this image is a little noisy. I'll fix that by dropping down to the detail panel. I'll increase the noise reduction to 100%. That should take care of the noise. To compensate for that extreme noise reduction, I'll increase the sharpening some. I'm also going to put just a little bit of color noise reduction in there. From here, I'll now go to the color mixer panel. I'll start with the yellows. First, I'll decrease the saturation, and then I'll also decrease the luminance. Luminance is your darks and lights. Next, I want to make some adjustments to the greens. First, I'll drop the luminance, then increase the saturation just a little bit, and I'll shift the hue over just a tad to get a better looking green. Next are the reds. Here, I just want to reduce the saturation just a little bit. I'll do the same thing with the orange. Now let's switch over to the masks. The first thing I want to do is use the brush tool. I'll use that to get rid of that blue hue in the lower right-hand corner. Now that we have that area masked, I'll turn off the red overlay. I'll then go over to the saturation slider and reduce that way down until it looks like it matches the rest of the image. That looks pretty good. The next thing I want to address are those windows in the back. You can really see the noise in them. It's because they're too bright. Noise is usually most noticeable in the darker areas. This is no exception. You can avoid this with multiple exposures, but that's a whole different topic and completely impractical for this kind of photograph. In this situation, it's easily fixable. Once again, we're going to access the masking tools. This time, instead of using the brush tool, we're going to use the select object tool. Let's do that now. The first thing I'm going to do is click inside the window and drag my cursor within the perimeter of that window and then zigzag in the middle so I pick everything up. Once you unclick inside that window, the program will fill in the rest of the mask. And there you go. It's like magic. Now, let's knock out the rest of those windows. Every time I click into a different window, it creates a new instance, kind of like its own layer. Once I finish this second window, I'll go ahead and cut to the end. That way you don't have to watch me adjust every single window. When you see me do one window, the process is the same for all the rest. And that's it. That's our last window. All of our window layers are to the right of that green bracket. If for some reason you need to change something on any particular window, you can always go back and select it and fix it. Now let's go ahead and adjust those windows. First, I'll bring the exposure down, and then I'll increase the contrast just a tad, and then I'll go to the whites and increase them just a little bit so I can see what's inside those windows. There are some white objects in there which look like fluorescent light fixtures. And that should do it. Since we're finished with the masking, I want to go back to the color mixer. When I look at this image, it seems like it has, I don't know, too much magenta in it. I want to desaturate some of that. Well, that does seem to help. It's really not that uncommon to have old color negatives with some kind of a color cast. It's not always easy to completely get rid of it, especially when that color cast is uneven throughout the image. This image isn't too bad. I've had way worse. I think that's it with the camera raw section. I'm going to select OK, and we're back in Photoshop. Now I'll make 2 copies of my camera raw layer. I'll turn off the original to protect it. I'll label the 2 new layers Sharpen. I know that might sound confusing, but they won't look the same at all when we finish. In just a second, the image icon on the top layer will change to gray. Now let's go to Filter, Other, and High Pass. Everything turns gray, and we now have a strength adjustment box. The idea here is to create a nice etching, but you don't want to create halos or anything like that. If you do, you've gone too far. I'll make some adjustments here until it looks just right. I think that looks pretty good there. Now I'll just select OK, go to the Blending Modes drop-down box, and select Overlay. Next, I'll group my 2 sharpen layers into a single folder. Just drag those 2 layers down to the folder icon at the bottom, or type Ctrl or Command G. And then I'll rename my folder Sharpen. Now I'll make a copy of our Sharpen folder. Then open the folder, highlight the 2 files inside, right-click, and select Merge Layers. Then drag that image above the folder and dump the folder. We've now created a single image of everything we've done. We also have all of the backups under it. Just FYI, I did do one final cleanup with my top layer. I renamed it to Final Cleanup. All I did was make one final sweep through the image to find any little things I might have missed. I did miss some things, and I did clean them up. We're now pretty much at the end. The last thing I want to do is crop this image. Normally, if there's an extreme crop, I would do that at the very beginning. But this is a real minor trim along the outer edges. Each corner and sides have handles. For this image, I'll only use the top and side handles. I'll start with the top handle and pull that down just a little bit. Then the left side handle. I'll use the arrow keys to nudge the image left and right and up and down. Sometimes it's hard to get your frame to go where you want, All you got to do is zoom in on the image, and then you can make a more precise crop. Once you're satisfied with your crop frame, then just hit the enter key and the crop will take effect. Now let's look at some before and afters. And there you go. I think we can put a done stamp on this. That's pretty much it. Normally it only takes a few minutes to do a photograph, but this is a tutorial after all, and I had to slow things down and show you everything step by step. But in reality, I can zip right through these images. I mean, they're like really fast, within a couple of minutes per photo, but it also depends on the damage. You're going to find that your images are going to be all over the map when it comes to damage. And I use the word damage in kind of an encompassing way. You might have to do color corrections, despeckling, tonal corrections, fix scratches, make selections like we did with those windows. In reality, I probably didn't need to do those windows, but I just wanted to. Don't ask me why, I just did. And you're going to find that most of your images that you've taken over your lifetime are going to be pretty useless. You're going to go through them and you're going to go like, wow, I took a lot of photos that you'll never look at again. As did I. So the only thing I did was I just archived them. Why? I don't know. I just did. I just couldn't let loose of them. I just couldn't. And that's pretty much it. So I hope you got something out of this. I hope this was helpful. And we did go over quite a bit in this video. And I don't think I have anything else. Well, once again, thanks for watching.